I feel like Stephanie J. Block, you need no introduction, and that's just because I've been following you for over 20 years.
Oh gosh.
Um, so the first thing I want to ask you is you've sung on stage with Cher, you've sung
Yeah.
on stage with Dolly Parton, and of course you have a Tony Award. When you were tackling the very intense roles of Pfeiffer, Belle, Ariel, and Mary Poppins at Disneyland, is this what you imagined your career could be?
Okay, well, first of all, damn you. Secondly, do you know what? Even young Stephanie the story has it, and it is true, that my mother forged my birth certificate so that I could audition for the Disneyland Summer Parade. I wasn't yet 16, so she had to forge my birth certificate. So that already tells you enough of what you need to know about sort of the loving show mother that, embraced me and encouraged me. But I was serious even back then. I went to the Orange County, which was the high school of performing arts back then. And everything had that high level of stakes and intensity and discipline. So whether I was Fight for the Pig dancing down the parade route at Disneyland, I took as much pride as I did with, doing Stephen Sondheim's Into the Woods. I've kind of always been, this is my craft and I must dedicate myself to the craft.
Well, I will tell you that next Tuesday I'm going to Disneyland, and as a result of finding out your own backstory, I'm going to be far more respectful of the people who are performing in those shows than I might have been otherwise.
Oink, oink, oink. There you go. You have to actually put your hand into the big head to actually move the oinker, to move the nose.
Now, in doing research about you for the things that I didn't know, I understand that you were referred to at your church as the little Ethel Merman.
I was, yeah.
Now, that was when you were 7 years old. You have since had the opportunity to play Reno Sweeney, which is a role that Ethel Merman did.
Yes.
Are there other Ethel Merman roles that you would like to do?
Well, I think with a lot of the old, I don't know if you can say old, but some of the classic musical theater pieces, there might have to be some reworking. Would I love to play Annie Get Your Gun? Absolutely, I'd love to play Annie. But I think someone like Larissa Fasthorse might have to go in there and change a lot of the lines in the material so that no harm is caused with some of these older pieces. And a lot of Ethel's pieces, sadly enough, if you go back through what we know now and how we have quote unquote evolved, a lot of her stuff, you would have to kind of fine tune and massage a little bit. But does the music still hold up? Yes. Does the sort of crackle in her performance and the indelible, performance that she's left for us still hold true in my heart? Yes, because at my heart, I'm an old MGM girl. That is like you put on one of those old movies, the Andy Hardy meets anything with Judy Garland, anything with Ann Miller, and it just changes the whole course of my day. So yeah, the Ethel Merman canon, there's still a lot of good there, but yeah, in this day and age, you might have to rework a few things.
Well, the nice thing is you are young enough that you still will have an opportunity to do Hello Dolly, because by the time they're ready to do another one, you could
I
you
might be age
you
appropriate.
could be age
Yeah,
appropriate for Dolly Levi.
I'll take it.
Now, I've seen you in multiple shows. I saw you in Falsettos, and frankly, I think you were robbed for the Tony Award, because that whole show is a show I will never forget.
Oh, thank
I
you.
saw 9 to 5 in Los Angeles. I saw The
Yeah.
Boy from Oz. I recently saw Into the Woods before it closed. And the
Okay.
first time I saw you was in Crazy for You at La Mirada,
Oh my gosh.
because that's where I grew up. So
Okay.
you and I grew up not far from each other.
Yeah, with McCoy Rigby Productions. Yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. You were Polly, if I remember correctly.
that's right.
So those shows, absent the boy, Crazy for You, are a mix of huge successes and less successful shows. And something Hal Prince said that I thought was really interesting was how much he learned more from the shows that weren't successful than the ones that were. And I'm wondering, is there a difference between the lessons you've learned on shows that were successful versus the ones that were not?
Well, first of all, I think we just have to say that 75% of most Broadway endeavors would be defined as quote unquote failures. So, right off the bat, three-quarters of every show that gets mounted is not going to last as long and get their money back. I can't speak to the producer end of it. I can only speak to the actor end of it. And yeah, I do learn a lot about myself when things don't go as I hoped, prayed, or wished. I will say I always enter a piece 150% because I think you have to love the project with that much in order to dive in, right? To give your all. Now, when it starts falling apart, I'm also very much aware of that. I like to drink the Kool-Aid, but all of the flags start going up where you go, uh-oh, this may not be, going to Radio City to collect all the Tonys. But somehow I look at these artists that always start from scratch, begin again, are willing to put their vulnerable selves on the line for show after show after show. And that to me is the biggest statement of most artists I know, that we really are willing to accept three-quarters of it as failure and a small one-quarter as success. And we keep jumping in head first. I think that is a beautiful thing to be a part of, to pay attention to, and just to keep walking through life going, I'm not sure if this is gonna, what's that old saying, Craig, that what would you choose to do if you knew you couldn't fail, right? And we know we're going to fail, and yet we still choose to do it. And some may look at that as a fool's errand, or some may look at that as a hero's path. And I choose to think of it as a hero's path.
A hero with passion.
A hero with passion and grace and resilience. I mean, sort of all of the greatest qualities you would hope for in a human being. I think live performers, they're a testament to that.
Now, your performance in Falsettos of I'm Breaking Down strikes me as a 3-act play in 4 minutes and 48 seconds.
I think you're very right.
What was the process of creating the ever increasingly intense breakdown over the course of that song? Because that, to me, it's not just about singing it, it's about bringing that whole breakdown to life so that you have a place to start and a place to end.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You've got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. I find it so interesting that William Finn wrote essentially an 11 o'clock number in the first half hour of the play. That in and of itself is so out of form that it's kind of wild. I love James Lapine, and I had worked with him before with Little Miss Sunshine. So he knew also the way that I like to work in a room. He knew it was going to be a big test. So he said, I'm going to give you your space. I'm going to give you a couple days by yourself with our co-choreographer. I'm going to give you a whole host of props that you would find in your kitchen. I'm going to let you play. And then I'm going to come in. I'm going to see what you have created. And then for James, it's very much simplicity defines mastery. Okay. So believe it or not, that epic song had more crap and props and movement to it than what you saw in its final version on Broadway. But I approached him and he said, how do you see this song? And I said, I think I see this song as like Carol Burnett having her own culinary show. And he goes, okay, well, show me what you've got. And that's who I had in my head when I was developing it. So I kind of stripped all of the Marvins and all of the Wizards and all of the Jasons away and just went, this is Carol Burnett / Trina trying to put on a very composed culinary show, and little by little, her inner voice, all of her demons just start taking over. And I actually went too far, and he had to bring me back. And he's like, now we've got to find the balance between humor, angst, and a conversation with the audience. And so that was the balancing act, not the singing with the banana in my mouth, not with the pot on my head as a crown. All of that external stuff was silly and fun. And I will admit, there were nights where those movements anchored me in the lyric, because the lyric is also very wordy and you could kind of get lost in the music of it all. So those moments anchored me, but the conversation changed every night because of how the audience responded, whether I looked up, whether that knife like was more aggressive to them or to Whizzer. There were nights I actually threw the rest of the banana in the audience. So that conversation, and once we found that balance between angst, pain, and humor, then I think we found magic. And that's when I think the audience was responding more to what I was doing, because that beautiful messiness is what the audience responded to.
Carol Burnett has to be a huge influence for you. And the only reason I say that is because while you were doing Sunset Boulevard, you posted on your Instagram account a picture of Gloria Swanson side by side with Carol Burnett and said
Yes.
that your performance was going to be a combination of the two. How
Yes.
important is Carol Burnett in your life?
She's wildly important to me. For me to watch her variety show, well, now I could watch it at my disposal because I do have the entire box set. But she, to me, being able to stand up as her and have a conversation with her audience, to break that fourth wall and to expose herself, to be secure enough, I should say, to say, this is who I am as Carol, let's banter and talk, then to embody a character in some of the most dramatic things I've ever seen, then to embody humor and to not be so serious about herself that she could absolutely make fun of herself in the middle of a full skit. She's a genius, and I didn't know how to maybe articulate it as a young person, but I certainly could recognize that this woman was doing the complete magic trick of doing drama, of doing comedy, of being herself, of having musicality and a voice where she could sing. And that to me was like Mecca. She was able to do it all. And I knew that if I could even do a fraction, I could do the 1/4, the 3/4 I might fail, but if I could do 1/4 of what Carol Burnett was doing, then there was a place for me in this world. So yes, she's just, I think, the epitome of all that seems like approachable and attainable, and yet still completely magical and mystical, where you go, who is this woman? And yet you still find yourself wanting to try to reach that level.
Yeah, she is otherworldly in her talent,
Yeah.
that's for
Yeah.
sure. I want to ask you one more question about falsettos, and that's
Okay.
Trina's song,
Yeah.
because that had to have been written in late 1980, early 1981, since March of the Falsettos went on stage at Playwrights Horizon in
Mhm.
1981. How prescient was that song that 43 years later we are still suffering the whims of the happy, frightened men who rule the world?
Well, I'm already tearing up because it's, for some reason, living in this day and age, now I'm sure every generation could speak the same way, but it feels more prescient than before. I can tell you that on November, was it the 6th? Was it the 8th? When we thought the presidential election was going to go one way and we had to wait through the night, and then the next morning it was called as to who was going to be our future president. That was a very defining moment. That was a polarizing moment. And that evening, when I started to sing, I'm tired of all the happy men that rule the world, the whole audience, there was an exclamation. Some gasped, some clapped, some wept, and we were unified in that brick and mortar building. What was going on outside of that space, we felt it. Those lyrics were right there at the tip of our fingers and our tongues and our hearts. And I cannot tell you how unified we all felt with those words coming out of my mouth with the news that we just got. Because I don't know about you, but I was hopeful that the first woman president was going to take the office. And it changed drastically. And our futures felt and looked different. And Bill Finn's words could not have expressed more beautifully and articulately and with more humanity than Trina's song that night.
Yeah, and it just seems like it's gotten more true
Absolutely.
since then. Absolutely gotten
Absolutely.
more true.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about something a little bit more current,
Mhm.
which is Into the Woods. You said that was a dream role 30 years in the making. What
Mhm.
inspires you most about this show in general, and more specifically about the role of the baker's wife?
Well, I think the older we get, in the beginning of my career, I wanted to wear characters as like a costume and take on their shape, their form, their sound. Now, as I get older, the goal is to bring myself to a character, to bring my story, my shape, my sound to these characters. And the baker's wife is very much that. I am playing opposite my husband, so the baker and the baker wife couldn't be more true than I feel is being portrayed now. My husband and I had quite a journey to get a child. It took us well over 5 years. And as you can imagine, from Chinese herbs to shots to, geriatric pregnancies, all of the above. When we tell that story, we are them and they are us. So there's that. In the making, however, with this entire piece, I like to joke, but it's really not a joke, that Into the Woods is life. The themes that are interwoven in this piece, doesn't matter if you're in high school or you're 80 years old or you're a middle-aged woman or you have a child, don't have a child. Everybody's journey personifies a different stage in someone's life. And that's what you're going to hear. That's what the audience is going to be attuned to. So right now, my journey as the baker's wife and having a child is far different than me wanting to play the baker's wife, like you said, 30 years ago. What drew me to that character back then, of course, was Joanna Gleason, her dry humor, her interpretation of these lyrics that were so, I thought, truthful and had yet to see the complicated depth of each frigging part and each frigging song and lyric. And now that my palette has matured quite a bit, I understand many of the nuances that Stephen Sondheim, even most recently, we found out, Moments in the Woods isn't just WOODS. He also wrote it as WOULDS. And when you start changing that word of woods, as we know is forestry, or woods with possibilities and choices and could have beens, it all changes. And that's the brilliant of Into the Woods. It grows, it breathes, and it changes with the person, with the life that is behind it.
And it also changes with our perception of the show. I saw Into the Woods at the La Jolla Playhouse before it went to Broadway.
Okay.
Because I'm that much of a Sondheim fan. And I found when I was in the theater, I guess it was last year when I was in New York and saw the show.
Uh-huh.
I found myself getting emotional at places that I didn't think I was getting emotional before. And I realized, well, I'm, however many years older now. And so
Right.
how I'm responding to the show is very different.
Right. Can I ask what lyric really punched you in the gut this time around?
As a gay man who doesn't have children, it was children who will listen. It was just the entirety of that song.
Yeah.
Maybe because I'm a godfather now and I wasn't before. I don't know what it is, but there was something about that I felt like that's talking to me. It's not just talking to people who have children.
Right. Yeah. Our future is listening. How are we going to shape that future? Yeah.
Absolutely. Now you mentioned your husband, Sebastian, with whom
Yeah.
you were co-starring in this show. You met when you were in Wicked together.
Yes.
Which I also saw, by the way, in San Francisco before it went to New York.
Oh my God.
But you got married before a performance. I think it was 16 years ago.
Mhm.
And then you just went on stage. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering what you remember most about that particular performance, particularly when you were singing As Long as You're Mine.
Well, first of all, anytime a couple, regardless of what stage it is in your relationship, when there's a secret that just two of you hold, there is that sort of butterflies in the belly. There is sort of the giggle and the unspoken, we know something that nobody else knows. So that excitement certainly carried through. I'm sure we had smiles. Elfie isn't supposed to smile through the whole show, but internally I'm sure I had an extra sparkle in my eye and a smile that was underneath that green makeup and surface. When we did As Long as You're Mine, it was a defining moment, certainly in my career, because again, all of those words took on a completely different meaning as husband and wife. Lay by my side. I feel like a different woman. My body has woken up. It was really very special. And to say, I finally feel Wicked, it's almost like a Mad Lib. I finally feel I'm putting a different meaning, even though I'm saying wicked. I feel complete. I feel elevated. I feel like we're just beginning, you know? So I'm sure the audience may not have known what we were delivering, but they might have felt a certain weight and importance to that moment, because it certainly was important to us.
Well, hopefully somewhere along the way you have found or will find somebody's video of that moment so that you have
At
it.
night? Yeah.
Yes, that would be
October
pretty
the 6th.
terrific.
Whoever has October the 16th of 2000, is it 7?
Yes.
2007, calling all bootleggers, which I am not endorsing, but if you have that particular day, sock it to me.
Yes. I also had the privilege of seeing you as the young Liza Minnelli in The Boy from Oz.
Oh,
And I saw one of the interviews that you did around that time, and you said you weren't doing the Liza that we all know and love now. This is a Liza who was 18, who it
yeah.
was before her fame had come to her. If let's say 30, 40 years from now, somebody wants to do a musical about somebody perhaps with whom you collaborated, and an actor was going to take on the role of the young Stephanie J. Block,
Mhm.
how would you like that character to be portrayed?
I would like her to be hopeful. I would like her to be silly. I would like her to be um, brassy, because I was big and brassy. And I think I would like always kind, but ready to play. Those would be the words that I would infuse into the actress. It would be, I think, much like Liza, very difficult to watch that portrayal, right? Especially when it's spanning, like if somebody was to play young me, but span 35 years of me in 45 minutes, I would feel like there's a lump in my throat going, oh, but there's more. Oh, but you forgot to add that. But I think I would also have an open heart and the grace to accept it and receive it and hopefully lovingly support it. Yeah, support the actor.
Right. Now, actors need a lot of support in the business that you're in, particularly when they're in troubled productions
Mhm.
or controversial productions. And in 2006 interview you did with Broadway World, you called the role of Fanny Brice your favorite regional theater role, and went
Mhm.
on to say it's time to bring her back to Broadway. What a powerhouse role for any actress is.
Mhm.
Producers interested can call 555 Steph, which I thought was terrific. The
You thought that
project,
was terrific. You thought it
I
was terrific, Craig.
yes, I did. I did. I'm not going to pretend to be Nicky Arnstein. Um, but Fanny is back on Broadway
Yeah.
in a production that has had more roller coasters than Disneyland.
Yeah.
What does this production tell you about the challenges of producing contemporary musical theater and the pitfalls that have to be avoided?
Well, if I'm going to answer this, my disclaimer is I am taking great liberties because I have no horse in the race as a producer, right? But what I would like to see happen is that we cast a part based on the merit and the truth and the marriage of an actor and a piece, not based on what could possibly sell tickets because of the pedigree of one particular person or one particular thing. It is a collaboration and a marriage, and they all have to meet up. I think we also have to entertain the idea of thinking outside the box, yes, and then step into rehearsal. And then if it doesn't go as planned, that there is the open-heartedness and the grace that I just spoke about to say, okay, great, you are monstrously talented. Perhaps this is not the vehicle that we all thought it was going to be for you, and that's not going to service you or the piece. Let's rethink. How do you feel about that? Let's re-engage the conversation. So much like art, live theater, that it is a living, breathing thing, that I wish also the creation of a piece can continue to be that without looking at the bottom line, that something is being created for artistry's sake, and that within that landscape or ecosystem, things change, or mistakes were made, or gosh, this isn't working out the way we hoped, or my God, this is working out even better than we hoped, right? But that the conversation can still happen, and that grace can surround that. That's what I feel. That's what I feel.
You posted another video that I thought was utterly compelling, which was you singing As If We Never Said Goodbye at the Kennedy Center in Sunset Boulevard,
Oh, thanks.
which is gorgeous. So you're giving us all optimism that there might be a production. Do you have any new ways to dream, shall we say, about a Broadway production in which you play Norma Desmond?
I have 25% chance that maybe 50% chance that there will be new ways to dream. The timing is not the timing I would like. There is a project that is in the works for cinema for Sunset Boulevard. That is ALW's focus. That's the really useful group's focus. And I can understand that again as a businesswoman. As the artist, I would have loved to have seen a momentum and a transfer, because I got to tell you, Craig, when I was asked by the artistic director, Jeffrey Finn of the Kennedy Center, what would you like to do in the next year? And I came out with this. I had no idea that this part and I would embrace each other in such a way that it affected me, it affected the audience, it affected the whole piece to be looked at in a completely different way. That was not my goal, but this was one of those times where we were all jumping in head first with no expectation, just wanting to create something different, timely. And I am of the school now that if you are going to revive, there needs to be a why. Why are we reviving this? What is the real truth to this piece that can affect people now? And we found that, and that was mental health. Our focus was defining mental health, what that looks like in a woman of 50 years old, and how it's defined from a white, cis, young man in his 20s, and how he sees her differently and how I see myself differently. And we were able to get that done in 10 days of rehearsal. So yes, the chatter is good. The Lord has been told. He feels very good about it. Imogen, his daughter, came out to see it, and she is very discerning and opinionated. And she said all the right things that I would have hoped for to her father. It's just all things in good time. So we shall see what the next couple years might bring. I'd like to hope that there's space for it back on Broadway. We'll see.
I would assume Derek was terrific as well.
Nobody better. And I will speak to him also as a leading man. Nobody better. He enters a room, he's kind, he's friendly, he's prepared, he's punctual, he asks for what he needs, but in a respectful way. He's got the goods in to lead a show, not only by talent and looks and poise, but also all of the humanities that you would want backstage and on stage.
Yeah, I've known him for years because he used to do a series here called For the Record, where people would perform in and around you. And he was amazing. It didn't matter if he was doing songs from Scorsese shows or Baz Luhrmann shows.
Right. He's a California kid. I always forget that. Yeah.
Yeah, we all are. California has to represent here. One last question, Stephanie. There was a Tony Monday, and I haven't done the math to figure out what it was, probably last year or the year prior, that you posted, a video where you said to your friends who were or were not nominated that regardless of that the story continues to be told. Mm-hmm. What's the story that's most important for you to tell through your work today and through these evenings you have with Seth Rudetsky?
For me right now, the word that just is screaming in my head is connection. Absolute connection. If you are putting something out there and it is not being received and then digested and something is being thrown back at you, that's my ultimate goal. And whether I am playing a part, whether I'm myself, whether I'm beside ridiculous, monstrously talented and smart Seth Rudetsky, then for me, the evening was not a win if I did not connect and communicate with my audience. So that's always the goal. I certainly think we'll do that at the Wallace. These intimate nights and spaces they're a joy to me, and they really fill up my artistic bank. And much like Carol Burnett, it does feel like I'm standing there in my own skin, wanting to meet them and wanting them to meet the real me.
Well, you're going into a great venue because the Wallace is a truly beautiful space.
I can't wait. I
It
really can't wait.
neither can I because I will be there.
Oh, good.
I will
Well, you may
absolutely
know
be.
my lyrics better than I, and you may. Craig, what comes next?
Yeah,
Well, you know
I
these evenings too. Seth is also like, he knows my career better than myself, and he'll sit at the piano and say, "Oh, remember when you played Little Mermaid? Let's just do part of your world." And but we've not rehearsed that. We did not sing that. So that too is it only happens one night, and it only happens if you're in that room in that very moment.
well, I
Yeah.
have to tell you, it was pretty daunting between knowing what Seth can pull out of his pocket, for me to interview you, knowing you're coming here to be interviewed, and then also knowing that you have your podcast where you're also interviewing people. I thought, I got to bring my A game to this conversation.
Well, you were tremendous, and man, did you have me think, and I'm very grateful for your time.